Now, my request, Madam Ruchira. Yes. Actually, I mean, I have not given introduction to any of the speakers because they don't need any introduction. And if you can simply Google their names, you will get a lot of information. Kindly do that, because if there is any, I mean, time left at the end of the session, we will go to that. I request Madam, she has also worked on the international level, so she will start from the issue at the international level. And also, as you all know, that, I mean, without any stringent legislation, we cannot solve any problems. So she will be discussing more about the need of a new legislation also. Okay, thank you, ma'am. Welcome. Yeah.
Thank you, Victor, and thank you, Dr. Krishnan, for a really comprehensive presentation. I greet everyone who's part of this webinar on the World Day Against Human Trafficking. This is a very significant day and part of our movement to make sure that no human being is bought or sold on our planet. And there have been successive waves of this struggle. There have been movements against slavery, as we know, in the 19th century, and successful. Today, it's not legal to be a slave owner anywhere in the world. And similarly now, our movement in our generation, our world, and our lifetime is a movement to make sure that nobody is bought or sold for child labor, bonded labor, or prostitution. I had founded an NGO about 20 years ago called Apne Aap. It first began in Bombay and now works all over India, in Bihar, in Delhi, in Calcutta, especially among denotified tribes who are trapped in intergenerational prostitution. They were nomadic groups who were labeled as criminal tribes under British colonialism. And then slowly they were so marginalized that they forgot their own livelihoods and were trapped in pimping and prostitution. And the system continues till this day, though the Criminal Tribe Act, of course, has been repealed, which is why it's known as a denotified act. But the stigma and discrimination continue. Some of the names you will recognize among such groups are Nuts and Bediyas and Sasis and Kanjars, and they exist all over our country. So I work among such groups to make sure that somehow this system is eradicated by preventing intergenerational prostitution. So that prostitution, just like bonded labor, is not passed down from mother to daughter. And we do this by getting the children of prostituted women into school. The reason I've explained what we have done in the last 20 years is that now I have moved to New York and other people are running Apne Aap in India, the organization, and I have become a professor in New York University on the subject of human trafficking. And globally, I have been working with the United Nations to make sure that this system, which I first saw in India as trafficking between first Nepal and India to the brothels of Bombay, and then saw among these formerly nomadic groups as intergenerational prostitution, is actually something which exists all over the world. And I worked in the UN for 10 years to help the UN create better laws and policies on this. When I began working in the UN, there was no UN protocol. And I highlighted the issue along with other activists and organizations like the Coalition Against Trafficking in Women, Equality Now. Now I'm also on the board of the Coalition to Abolish Prostitution, the Global Fund to End Modern Slavery, Polaris Project, Coalition Against Trafficking in Women, Asia Pacific. I work with many, many sisters and brothers across the world to see how we could highlight this malaise, this scourge collectively, because it was a bigger problem than I realized when I had made a documentary on trafficking from Nepal to India. So, we realized that the old convention to end slavery, which had existed from 19th century, could not do anything to combat these new forms of human trafficking. They needed new ways of responding legally and to protect those who were the most vulnerable. And so I worked with these groups across the world and with United Nations agencies to make sure that we could create new legal frameworks. And I went and testified to the United Nations, first in ARIA formula, then to the Security Council, for the passage of the UN protocol to end trafficking. I did the same with the United States Senate to get the first trafficking law passed in the United States. And the reason I went to the United Nations and the United States first was I tried hard in our own country to get a new law passed against trafficking in the 2000s. I'm talking about years ago when I realized this problem was so pervasive. But, I got a typical response, which many of you are familiar with. One was that very, very casteist response that, oh, if some women don't exist for prostitution, then good women will be raped. So that meant that, there's a difference between good women and bad women, and some women from low caste groups should be sexually available. This was the norm when I began working on this subject 20 years ago. Also, the other thing I heard was, of course, sexism, because, many people, police officers, policymakers, law enforcement people, lawyers, even some activists told me men will be men. So they will continue to buy women for sex. And all we should do is mitigate the circumstances by making sure that all the men were given condoms. So make it more convenient for men, never mind what happened to these marginalized caste girls. So I was quite shocked, and I thought, okay, if I can't begin in my own country, I will go to the United Nations and work with other NGOs and see if we can get it passed across the world. And so in the year 2002, as you know, we got the US law passed. In the year 2000, we got the UN protocol passed. And there are two very important things in both those laws, which we have tried over the years to get incorporated into Indian law. The United Nations Protocol to End Trafficking in Persons, especially women and children, is held by the United Nations Office for Drugs and Crime. Today, the World Day Against Trafficking in Persons is observed also and led by the UN agency known as the United Nations Office for Drugs and Crime. So they are the keepers of this protocol. Now, this protocol basically deals with some new provisions. One is that it calls on all countries to change their laws to address the demand for human trafficking. Now, but what does that mean, addressing the demand for human trafficking? It means that we must punish the perpetrator and not the victim. In the past, many women in prostitution, as you know, sometimes people in bonded labor, child laborers themselves were punished. Women in prostitution, especially, were rounded up by the police, put into jails. They were told they are bad women, while the perpetrators, the sex buyers, and the traffickers would go scot-free. So we asked for a change in that in the UN protocol, saying that the victims of human trafficking should be treated as victims and they should be given legal support, health support, economic support, social support to start new lives again. It also asked for countries to address the demand by punishing the sex buyers and the traffickers and employers of bonded labor, child labor, and other forms of exploited labor. The other thing that the UN protocol has, which is very, very important, is that it redefined human trafficking itself by focusing not on movement. A person did not have to move across national borders to be considered trafficked, but to focus on exploitation, the intention of exploitation and the action of exploitation. So basically what it said was that the protocol said that human trafficking is formed of three things: act, means, and purpose. In the act, there could be movement, but there need not necessarily be movement. There could only be just harboring or receipt. And this is very pertinent to our understanding of bonded labor as human trafficking, because in bonded labor, sometimes children born in bonded families are also asked to work in agricultural fields, in construction work along with their families. There is no movement, but they are definitely harbored, they are definitely received, and therefore they are considered trafficked. So this is very important, that movement was not necessary, but was part of the UN protocol as a possibility. The other thing the UN protocol did was it focused very clearly on exploitation. And it said there are different forms of exploitation. So of course, I work with prostitution, so I keep talking about prostitution, but it said prostitution, sexual exploitation, child labor, bonded labor, child marriage, child soldiers, organ trade, all these are forms of bodily exploitation because they are based on violating the integrity of the human body. And there is body invasion in prostitution, which even makes it more different from other forms of other forms of exploitation, which people have to understand as we move forward towards discussing the laws and the policies that India is trying to create now. So these two things are very integral to the UN protocol to end trafficking. The third thing which the UN protocol to end trafficking did was that in the means of trafficking, we had act, means, purpose. So purpose was always exploitation. Act was sale, purchase, kidnapping, harboring, receipt, and of course movement as a possibility. But in the means, besides force, fraud, coercion, trickery, deceit, threat, there is one more thing which we put into the UN protocol, which is very critical for us in the new world, which is abuse of a position of vulnerability. This is very important to us in places in India where we are looking at caste as a very big issue, as a root cause of trafficking, as poverty as a root cause of trafficking, gender as a root cause of trafficking. So these kind of inequalities, and now of course religious inequality, inequality of geographies, ethnic conflict also creates inequality, health inequalities, all this become root causes of trafficking. So we focused on abuse of a position of vulnerability also as a means of trafficking in the UN protocol, which meant that countries who wanted to prevent trafficking, the UN protocol asked countries to address the vulnerabilities of those who were likely to be trafficked, those who were either trafficked or likely to be trafficked, both as a prevention strategy and as an exit pathway. Because without addressing the vulnerability of the victim, you cannot hope for that person to start a new life. Without addressing the vulnerability of the person who is likely to be preyed on by traffickers, you cannot stop them from being preyed upon. And which is why in court, very often when a victim is produced in court and she's asked, did you say yes to being trafficked? Very often she will say yes, because she has to make a choice between feeding her children or feeding herself or buying a kidney for her father to being trafficked. And that yes does not mean yes. The fourth important thing which the UN protocol did, which is very, very important for us to understand, is it said the consent of a victim to her own exploitation will not make her, will still make her a victim of human trafficking. The consent does not mean that if she's consented, therefore she's not a victim. That's not true. So if a victim consents to her trafficking, which means she's exploited, she will be treated as a victim and therefore eligible to all the services which any victim of any crime should get, especially the ones that we have defined in the UN protocol, all the services from healthcare to housing to legal support to repatriation to everything which any country defines in its law. So her consent will still help her to be defined as a victim and her perpetrator still to be punished, because very often a perpetrator says, oh, she said yes, oh, she chose to do this. It doesn't matter. If she's exploited, then there will be an exploiter who will be punished and she will be treated as the exploited person. So based on this, many years ago, as you know, we began in 2013 to lobby for changes in the Indian law. We lobbied for many years and we succeeded somewhat in the year 2013, just after the Jyoti Singh Pandey bus rape, who's also known as the Nirbhaya bus rape case. There were stringent changes to the sexual harassment law in India. And in that, we said that we need to put in trafficking as a a whole definition of trafficking needs to be introduced into Indian law. And in that, the perpetrator has to be punished and the victim has to be given support. And we have to have prevention programs addressing the vulnerability of the person I call the last girl. You know, we know from the Bible, the last shall not be the least. And so we have to put the least front and center. And I call that person the last girl, the 13-year-old in a brothel or in bonded labor or in child labor. And so in section 370 of the Indian Penal Code, which came out as a result of this lobbying after the Nirbhaya rape case, we were able to make sure that the trafficker was punished, that vulnerability was addressed, that victims were given services and they would not be punished. This law addresses sexual exploitation specifically and child labor specifically. In terms of trafficking, it doesn't address other forms of labor trafficking. So we kept trying to then advocate with the government to say that we need to add in labor trafficking into this law. The section 370 of the Indian Penal Code is based on the UN protocol. It's a good law. But just 2 years ago, 3 years ago, the Indian government, the Ministry of Women and Child, proposed a new law on trafficking. Now, right now in India, there is the Bonded Labor Act, there's the Child Labor Act, there is POSCO, as all of you know, there's Section 370 Indian Penal Code, which defines human trafficking in India. And there is still on the books the Immoral Traffic Prevention Act, which is very strange. So we have multiplicity of laws in India. And on top of that, the government in its wisdom worked with a group of its own NGOs and created a draft for a new law. The new law was basically to dilute Section 370 of the Indian Penal Code, because in the new law, the new anti-trafficking law, it left out sexual exploitation completely from the definition of trafficking. It did not ask for the punishment of sex buyers, not ask for the punishment of end users or exploiters in the law. And without doing that, it does not meet the standards of the UN protocol. There are 16 million victims of sex trafficking in India today. There is no definition for them in this draft bill, which means they will be left out of the definition. And as has happened with the child labor law, the government will be able to say in data that the numbers of victims of sex trafficking have come down because they will not be defined. They did the same thing under the Child Labor Act, which they amended, where they left out people who were trafficked for audiovisual entertainment. They left out child labor who were trafficked for the entertainment industry. They left out people who were working in family-based enterprises. And most bonded labor is family-based. So by doing that, under the Child Labor Act, they were able to show that child labor in India has come down to the UN. And now they're trying to do the same thing through the new trafficking bill. A campaign against child labor and Apne Aap and many NGOs worked together to work with members of parliament in the previous parliament to defeat that law so that it was never put to vote finally. But now we hear that the government is again trying to introduce this bill. The other draconian measure they are doing in this bill is that they are trying to give in huge powers of surveillance to a new national anti-trafficking bureau that they want to set up, which will be able to go into anyone's home. It will be able to regulate anything. And this can be extremely dangerous given what the new regime is up to with, when you look at in connection with other acts and other things which are going on, which we can see. It also does not address livelihood options. It is completely shelter-based. And so for women and children who want non-shelter-based solutions, which is a best practice advocated by UNICEF, there is no provision either. So, we have to think about what this new child labor bill will look like and whether it will promote the rights of victims of trafficking or not. And in my opinion, the new bill will not promote the rights of victims of trafficking, nor will it alleviate their circumstances. In fact, it will do the opposite, because it will leave out victims of sex trafficking from the definition of human trafficking. So neither will they get services, nor will they be eligible for any kind of compensation or handouts. Secondly, it will give draconian power to the police, and we know how brutal the police can be, and whose side the police is normally on, of the perpetrators, of the traffickers. Sometimes they collude with them, sometimes they are customers themselves, sometimes they own the businesses anonymously. The third thing, it will create multiplicity of laws, creating more confusion for the illiterate victims, who will then have to depend on expensive lawyers and expensive legal systems. It will also create ambiguity of definitions, which will again be taken advantage by people of privilege who can hire lawyers and do things. So if we can lay our hands on the new trafficking bill, we should, and analyze it. And if we know any members of parliament on this World Day Against Trafficking in Persons, we should all take a pledge that we should reach out to them, warn them, alert them to this possibility that there is a new law which will actually dilute the UN protocol definition of trafficking, and will be against victims of trafficking in many different ways, create ambiguity, multiplicity of laws, remove some victims from the definition, and may give more power to the police, who may end up colluding with with traffickers and others. So we have to watch out for this, and on World Day Against Trafficking, we must take a pledge that we will work hard to focus on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal 5.2 as much as we focus on 8.7. Thank you. And I want to mention one thing which I forgot. If you give me just 2 more minutes, I wanted to mention that during this COVID pandemic, the victims of human trafficking are more affected than any other group that I know of, because COVID has made the vulnerable even more vulnerable. And especially among victims of sex trafficking, I have noticed that they are facing more police brutality. They are locked up inside brothels. Their children are sent back from school. They are cut off from learning. There are 11 people in tight rooms with no windows. They don't have access to food because many of them have no regular documents. They've of course lost their livelihoods. Traffickers are now asking them to make sex videos. They're asking them to offer their children for their sex videos. Pornographers have moved up because in COVID, pornographic use has gone up. So we have to think about these things also. Apne Aap, my NGO, has launched a campaign called 1 Million Meals. For the first 100 days, we distributed more than 3 million meals to victims of sex trafficking and their children in Bengal, in Bihar, in Delhi, in Bombay, and some parts of Jharkhand. We will be now going into phase 2 of the 1 Million Meals campaign, in which we will be distributing food, tarpaulin sheets, some medical supplies. And if anybody is interested in joining our campaign, please do email us either at 1millionmeals.org, the number 1. You can see the bag behind me of the 1 Million Meals, or of course on my website, apneaap.org, apneaap.org. If any NGO really needs help, please do reach out. And if anyone wants to support as a volunteer or in cash or kind, please do reach out. I'm launching this phase 2 of this campaign today on World Day Against Human Trafficking. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.